What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another edition here of Talking Ball, and today we are looking at Louisville basketball ahead of the 2024-25 season and trying to get to as many ACC teams as I can. And this is from the perspective of somebody who's going to be covering Duke basketball. So I'm going to give you an outsider's perspective of how I see Louisville right now, with certainly a lot of changes on the horizon, and most importantly, a new head coach. So last season, another tough year at Louisville, 8-24. Tough may be an understatement. For a program like Louisville with the reputation they have, that is a brutal season, I think is a better way to put it. They were better than the year before, which I think says a lot about where the state of the program was. And they were 3-17 in conference play, which was last in the conference, and they lost their one ACC tournament game. They did go 5-6 in non-conference play, which was better than the year before. But again, a really rough season at Louisville. So let's do like we do in each one of these videos. I'm going to go through the roster, then the projected lineup and rotation, and then the schedule and my predictions for the team this season. So looking at the roster, pretty much everybody is gone. And when I say pretty much, almost literally everybody is gone. Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, Mike James. Interestingly, they both went to NC State. Sky Clark went to UCLA. Trey White went to Illinois. Tyler Johnson, he went to Wake Forest. The whole roster's gone except for one guy, which was Aiden McCool. Let's just skip past that. Aiden McCool's back. He barely played last season, so I don't even know if he really counts. No offense, Aiden McCool. You're probably a great guy. But who's new? Well, I mentioned they've got a new coach, Coach Pat Kelsey, who had a tremendous run at the College of Charleston. And I think I really love what he did in just reinvigorating energy into this program and bringing in a completely new roster with a ton of experienced players. And we're going to get to that in one moment because he did bring in one freshman, Connie Roots, a 6'8" forward ranked inside the top 100 of 24/7 Sports. He brought in 12 transfers with college basketball experience. I just love that's the direction Coach Kelsey went with this team because it makes a ton of sense. You're trying to rebuild a foundation. You want guys who are proven and can play at the college level. And he went out and he went after it. And I just love what he did here. I'm not sure how it's all going to shake out, but I just think from a process standpoint, he killed it. So he brought in three of his former players from the College of Charleston. His leading scorer, Rain Smith, who is a tremendous three-point shooter. Kobe Rogers, who's a solid guard for them last year at Charleston. And James Scott, who is a shot-blocking big man. Played about 15-16 minutes at Charleston last season. He also brought in the best player and leading scorer from a really good James Madison team, Terrence Edwards. He brought in a really solid point guard in Chucky Hepburn from Wisconsin. And I think an underrated player in Javon Hadley, a 6'6" wing, maybe forward from Colorado, who just makes a lot of winning plays. Then it just keeps going. There was 12 transfers that were brought in. Frank Anselm Ibe, brought in as a 6'10 center, played about 10 minutes a game the past few years at Georgia. He previously played at Syracuse. Noah Waterman, 6'10", 6'11 forward from BYU, can stretch the floor. Kayshawn Pryor, brought in as a 6'10 forward as well from South Florida. Abubakar Traore, 6'5 wing, really good defensively, not a shooter, but really good defensively, like over a block and a steal per game at Long Beach. Corin Johnson played about 20-ish minutes per game as a 6'2 guard from Washington. And Ali Khalifa, a 6'11 big from BYU, who started the games for BYU. He played like 20 minutes a game, but in those 20 minutes, very interestingly, averaged about 4 assists per game. They played through him, and that is something I'm very curious how that's going to work out at Louisville. And listen, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. And look, this was the most difficult team for me to fill out my projected lineup in rotation. And I'm going to use a little bit of a cop-out. I ended up going with a depth chart for Louisville because I know no matter who I settle on, if you're a Louisville fan, you're probably going to disagree with me, and rightfully so. I think it's just a really tough roster to figure out who are the starters and reserves, and I think it's a great problem for Coach Kelsey to determine. Now, with that being said, I personally feel like Chucky Hepburn, Terrence Edwards, and Javon Hadley deserve to start based off their pedigree and what they've done at some big schools, and then what Edwards did last season at JMU. I also think Noah Waterman, with his ability to space the floor, probably starts at the 4. And I could see Khalifa starting at the 5, depending on what lineups they decide to go with. Because the guy who I guess didn't have in my starting lineup, I've copped out of my depth chart already here, was Rain Smith. And listen, he's Coach Kelsey's guy from Charleston. And as I'm saying this, as I was working on this, I have a hard time believing that he's not going to start for this team. So I could see Rain Smith being in the starting lineup, but he's just not at 6'2", he's not much of a playmaker. He averaged like 2 assists per game. And so I was looking to get a little bit more playmaking in the lineup, which is why I thought Hepburn might make more sense. But if you have Rain Smith starting, you could certainly have Khalifa as your center and play through him with his passing ability. I think Kobe Rogers is in the mix as, a guard off the bench. And I also think Corin Johnson's probably your 5th guard, so I think it may be tough for him to find minutes. But they could play 3 guards, and it depends on how they shift things around. I think Abubakar Traore is a great wing defender to bring off the bench. And it was really tough between Noah Waterman and Kayshawn Pryor. Pryor had better numbers at USF last season, but I think Noah Waterman, playing in the Big 12, has a little bit more experience going up against higher level competition. I think James Scott is your backup big, and Frank Anselm is your reserve, your 3rd string center, which means Connie Roots is out of the rotation as your lone freshman, but he could certainly crack the rotation. I am just really intrigued as to how Coach Kelsey is going to sort through his rotation with Louisville next season, because I think, again, he's got a lot of good problems to solve. So, schedule and predictions. Non-conference play, they'll have a home game against Tennessee, neutral site games in the battle for Atlantis against Indiana, either West Virginia or Gonzaga, and then either Arizona, Davidson, Oklahoma, or Providence. And then at home, again, they'll take on Ole Miss in the ACC-SEC Challenge. I like the way that, they've got 2 tough non-conference games, but they're both home. And for a program that's rebuilding, I think that makes a ton of sense. And then they're in a tough neutral site tournament in the battle for Atlantis, which I think makes a ton of sense to test this team early. Conference games. Home and away, Pittsburgh, Virginia, and Florida State. At home, Cal and Stanford, the 2 California schools, will come to them. Clemson, Duke, Miami, North Carolina, and Wake Forest. And on the road, it will be Boston College, SMU, so they'll have to travel to Texas, Georgia Tech, NC State, Notre Dame, Syracuse, and Virginia Tech. And I'll say this right off the bat, I think they got a favorable conference schedule, particularly when you look at the home and away splits. They've got Duke, North Carolina, Wake Forest, Clemson, and Miami all coming to Louisville, which I think is it's a big advantage for them this season, with those schools being, I think, some of the top teams in the conference all coming to them to play at home, where they'll have a home court advantage. I think is going to be very important for them this season. And while, some of the road games I think will be tough, like I think Notre Dame and Georgia Tech are going to be better than last year. I do think that some of the other games are winnable on the road, which is how you'd like to see it. So I have them going 8-3 in non-conference play and 11-9 in conference. And I could see it actually, if I were to make an adjustment, because that's what I was thinking before this video, I could see it being like maybe 7-4 non-conference, but maybe 12-8 in conference. Like I think this team is going to get better as the year goes on. They're going to have to gel, and they have a completely new roster, and that could take time. But I like a lot of the players they brought in, who've played at good programs, can contribute to winning teams, and I think Coach Kelsey, with his track record at Charleston, is going to figure out a way to make this team into what I think is going to be a bubble team at 19-12 overall. But I'm curious, what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. It helps me. It's awesome if you do. And share it with a friend. We're going to be doing college basketball, but specifically Duke basketball content during the regular season, and then NBA draft content once the season ends. So I'll see you guys next time. Peace.